Today we're talking about market and planned economies. Last time we already found out that we live in a very harsh world, one where we have endless desires but only limited resources to satisfy them. We also discovered the importance of supply and demand in our lives, and the importance of private property in understanding the entire history of humankind. Today we'll continue building on those ideas and talk about market and planned economies. Specifically, how resources are distributed in each system. Of course, this is part of a much larger discussion, an ongoing debate between capitalists and socialists, between capitalism and socialism, the one we mentioned last time. Let's start with the market. A market economy can be called self-organizing. That means the market doesn't need some external authority telling it what to do. No one decides who opens or closes a business, or what prices for goods and services should be. Of course, a market economy isn't perfect. There are crises, recessions, deep depressions. But time after time, the market seems to rebuild itself, returning to some kind of normality, a balance point, where production resumes and things become predictable again. This all works through the mechanism of supply and demand, the one we already discussed. Let's focus on resources now. We have three key questions: what to produce, how to produce it, and for whom to produce. In a market economy, all these questions are answered automatically through supply and demand. Imagine an entrepreneur who wants to get rich. To do that, they need to produce something, a product or service, but not just anything. It has to be something people actually want. So they study the market, look at competitors, and make decisions. Eventually, they choose what to produce. Then comes the next question: how to organize production most efficiently. Why does the entrepreneur care so much about efficiency? Because it's about their money, their well-being. All production costs are lost profit. So the lower the costs, the higher the potential profit. That's the main motivation. That's one side of the story. On the other side, we have the consumer, who wants two simple things: quality goods and low prices. Their motivation is the same. It's about personal well-being, their money, how much they spend and how much they save. What follows from that? In a market economy, every entrepreneur is constantly trying to organize production as efficiently as possible. In other words, to allocate resources wisely. That's the essence of free enterprise. People work for themselves, for their own good, for their own concrete personal life. And again, on the other side, there's the buyer, who acts like a filter between good and bad entrepreneurs. If a buyer likes a product or service, they'll come back. By doing so, they're essentially saying, this entrepreneur allocated resources wisely. Those who didn't, they go bankrupt. So, in theory, and I emphasize in theory, the market economy should be rational and efficient, because both sides, entrepreneurs and consumers, are interested in making it work that way. In practice, it generally works like this too, but of course there are many important nuances about how the market really functions. We won't cover those today. Today's just the basics. I'll leave those nuances in the description below. Feel free to explore them if you're curious. Now let's move on to the planned economy, also called the command economy. In a planned economy, there's a central decision-making authority that determines everything. You will close, you will open, the ticket will cost this much, a haircut that much, and so on. There's no supply and demand mechanism because there's no free entrepreneurship. There's only one big seller, the state. In theory, these central authorities know everything and can calculate everything. That's why, in theory, resource allocation should be as efficient as possible. Let's take an example. Suppose one of these planning centers decides that a city or region needs 3,000 cars. That's a specific goal. To produce 3,000 cars, you need a certain amount of metal, parts, labor, and time.
Knowing all this, the planners can allocate exactly the amount of resources required to produce the exact amount of goods needed. The key idea is that nothing is wasted, no more and no less than necessary. Another example, the planning center decides to build a dam. A dam is a large, expensive, and complex project. But inside a planned economy, the state can quickly redirect workers and resources to the site, build the dam, and everyone benefits. People get jobs, earn money, and don't starve. The state gets an important infrastructure project, and the economy grows because people are working and creating something useful for society. That's how it looks in theory. Humanity has tried to implement these ideas in practice. The most famous example was the Soviet Union, where everything belonged to the state. Factories, barbershops, cafeterias, everything. And yes, dams and whole cities were built from scratch, but something clearly didn't go according to plan. Today we talked about planned and market economies. Next time we'll discuss taxes and free things. See you later.